I never thought humiliation could feel so heavy in the chest, like a stone pressing down on my lungs while everyone else around me raised their glasses and laughed. The night of Claudia's 70th birthday should have been an ordinary family gathering. I dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual. Riley and I had been married for just over a year, and I was still learning how to navigate the complicated currents of this family. I thought showing up smiling and keeping polite conversation would be enough. I was wrong. The mansion glittered with chandeliers. Golden light spilled across polished marble floors. Waiters in black uniforms passed trays of champagne, their white gloves stark against the crystal stems. I remember standing near the long mahogany table stacked high with gifts wrapped in silver paper. Then Claudia, regal in her emerald dress, stepped forward with a leather folder pressed against her chest. She looked at me with that cool, assessing gaze and said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "Half of Riley's inheritance, $2 million will never be in your hands. You don't deserve it." My grip tightened on my glass. I nearly dropped it. The folder gleamed under the chandelier, a silent symbol of power. Guests chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether it was a joke or a declaration. I felt my face burn, my pulse thudding in my ears. Riley, standing only a few feet away, shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. I forced a smile, the kind that hides cracks. Around me, laughter continued, conversations flowed, and the clink of silverware on china masked the pounding of my heart. But inside, something shifted. Shock froze me first. Then came a strange calm, like the eye of a storm. For a moment, I was invisible in that glittering room, a ghost pressed against the wall while the family celebrated itself. That's the part that stings most, not just her words, but the way everyone carried on as if nothing had happened. I sat through the rest of dinner with my back straight, nodding when spoken to, raising my glass when others toasted. A smile fixed on my face while inside I was unraveling. Claudia leaned toward me once more, her diamonds catching the light. "Some people wear money," she whispered, "just for me. Others merely marry it." Then she laughed, tipping her head back so the whole table could hear her joy. In that moment, I understood something important. Humiliation can be endured. Silence can be sharpened into a weapon. What they didn't know was that I had already learned to watch carefully, to collect details, to remember every cruel word. I'll explain in a moment. This part matters. So tell me, have you ever been disrespected at a family event? Share your story in the comments. I need to know I'm not the only one. And if you're watching, hit subscribe. We need to talk about families and money. After that night, the glow of Claudia's mansion stayed in my mind like a bad photograph. I could still see the way the chandeliers threw sharp light across the polished floor, how every smile in the room seemed pasted on every laugh rehearsed. Families can look perfect from the outside, but when you live inside one, you see the cracks. Riley and I had met through work acquaintances years earlier. We both worked long hours, often late nights, building careers that promised stability. By the time we married, I thought we were a team. Our apartment in Boston wasn't a mansion, but it was ours, filled with the quiet pride of two people paying a mortgage with their own hands. I believed marriage would mean a new family, to lean on people who would accept me. Claudia shattered that illusion quickly. She played the part of the affectionate mother-in-law in public, placing a careful hand on my shoulder, when guests were around, calling me dear, in a tone smooth as glass. But when the doors closed, her words carried the sting of vinegar. She would study me with a tilted head and say, "You seem tired." A real partner to Riley would look more polished. Other times, she offered compliments with hooks buried inside them. "You're brave to try and keep up with Riley's world. Not many could manage." It was the kind of talk you couldn't protest. If I bristled, she'd widen her eyes and feign innocence. If I stayed quiet, she won. I chose silence more often than not. Silence felt safer, like placing a hand over a wound and pretending it wasn't bleeding. The truth is, Riley often missed it or chose not to see it. Claudia had a way of making her criticism sound like motherly concern, and Riley, raised in that orbit, sometimes mistook cruelty for love. When I mentioned it, Riley would shrug and say, "That's just how she talks. Don't take it personally." I stopped trying to explain, because explaining only deepened the loneliness. Yet Claudia always found ways to remind me I was an outsider. At a holiday dinner, she paraded a necklace worth $500,000 around her neck, turning her head so the diamonds caught every light. "Some people wear money," she declared, voice ringing through the dining room. "Others just marry it." Laughter followed, light and careless. I smiled because what else could I do? I think about that moment often, not because of the necklace, but because of Riley's silence. No one told Claudia to stop. No one said it was cruel. That silence was my first real education in what this family valued. They admired power, wealth, and the appearance of unity, even if unity came at the cost of one person's dignity. I learned to live behind a mask. At work, I was steady, capable, respected. At home, in the presence of Claudia, I played the role of grateful guest. And beneath it all, my resentment brewed quietly, waiting for the moment it would surface. But what Claudia didn't know was that masks can slip. Words whispered in the dark have a way of echoing louder than intended, and I had already begun to notice the small cracks in her polished facade. Marriage is supposed to feel like partnership, like two hands working the same rope. But after Claudia's birthday humiliation, I started to notice how often Riley's grip slipped away. It was in small things at first. Conversations cut short eye contact that didn't last, a reluctance to sit close on the couch after long days. At night, Riley would disappear into the study under the excuse of work, leaving me alone in our bedroom with the hum of the city outside the window. I wanted to believe it was stress. Our jobs demanded long hours, our schedules never lined up neatly. But deep down, I knew the real answer sat in the velvet chair of Claudia's living room, sipping wine and whispering poison. She had a way of sliding doubts into Riley's mind, soft as silk, sharp as glass. One evening, Riley returned from visiting Claudia with an envelope in hand. I asked what it was. Riley hesitated before saying, "She thinks we should update the trust arrangements, just in case." I felt my chest tighten. In case of what? The envelope contained draft paperwork carefully typed, suggesting new terms for inheritance. I noticed the language favored Claudia's oversight, as though I were some reckless outsider unfit to manage Riley's share of the estate. When I asked Riley about it, the response was half-hearted. She just wants to protect the family's future. Protect. That word echoed in my head, long after Riley went to bed. Protect from me. I began watching more closely. Claudia's visits to her attorney became more frequent. Her car parked outside a law office downtown, 2, sometimes 3 times a week. I kept notes, quietly marking dates and times in a journal. If she wanted a battle, I would not walk into it blind. Then came the message, the one that made the blood rush from my face. Riley had left a phone on the kitchen counter, a text chain still open. It wasn't Riley's words I saw. It was Claudia's. A message sent to a lawyer read, "We must prepare to challenge the estate before Morgan manipulates Riley. The sooner the better." I read it twice, 3 times, my hands trembling. The accusation was clear. I was the manipulator, the threat to be eliminated. I closed the phone before Riley returned and sat quietly at the table, staring at the wood grain until my eyes blurred. Families love to say blood is thicker than water. But when money is on the line, when millions dangle like ripe fruit, blood turns thin, almost transparent. I could feel the distance between Riley and me stretching wider each day, as if Claudia were prying us apart inch by inch. I told myself to endure, to wait, to gather. But endurance can sour into resentment, and resentment always finds a way to the surface. It happened during one of those carefully staged family gatherings, where every surface gleamed and every conversation hummed with false cheer. Claudia loved to host dinners that felt more like theater than meals. Her dining room stretched the length of a ballroom, the table dressed in white linen, silver candlesticks burning low. I sat at Riley's side, hands folded neatly in my lap, the very picture of composure. Claudia rose to make a toast. She wore a necklace that glittered like captured stars, diamonds large enough to blind. This, she announced, lifting the jewel with her manicured fingers, is worth $500,000. It is a family piece meant for those who understand true responsibility. She looked straight at me as she said it, her lips curling into that subtle smile that only I recognized as cruelty. The room laughed. I smiled too, though my jaw ached from holding it in place. But beneath the calm, something inside me cracked. There's a difference between enduring insults whispered in corners and absorbing humiliation delivered like a dagger in front of an audience. That night, her performance drew blood. I excused myself after dessert, claiming a headache. Riley barely looked up from conversation. In truth, I went to the study at home and checked the small camera we had installed months earlier for security. It wasn't meant for battles like this, but life has a way of handing you the tools you need. Scrolling through the recordings, I found it. Claudia standing in that very room weeks earlier, speaking to Riley in a voice low but firm. "Morgan cannot handle the estate. You know it. I will pursue legal control if necessary. Custody of the assets is safer in my hands." Her words were crisp, her tone calm, like she was ordering flowers for an event. Riley's reply had been silence, a silence that now echoed through my bones. I played the footage again and again, each time my anger sharpening into clarity. She wasn't just cruel, she was deliberate. This wasn't about family dinners or jewelry flaunted in my face. This was war dressed in pearls and champagne. As I watched, I thought of all the quiet moments when I'd swallowed my pride, when I'd smiled through her jabs, when Riley had brushed it off as nothing. Those moments stacked like bricks, and now the wall was complete. Claudia had built it herself, and I was done pretending it didn't exist. That night, for the first time, I felt no shame, only resolve. I backed up the video onto a separate drive, tucking it away like a blade hidden under clothing. She thought she could strip me of dignity and then of security, but she had underestimated the power of proof. Humiliation can break a person, but it can also harden them. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, city lights glittering behind me, and I whispered, "Not anymore." But what she didn't know was that I had already saved the footage. The scandal began with a single post on a Sunday morning. I was sipping coffee in the kitchen when my phone buzzed. A colleague had sent me a screenshot from social media. At first, I thought it was one of those idle gossips that floated through the city every weekend, but then I saw Claudia's face attached to the words. The account wasn't her official one. It looked hastily created using an old photograph from some gala years ago, yet the language was unmistakably hers, precise, cold, dripping with superiority. The post read, "Morgan is unstable. I will gain custody of Riley's trust if it is the last thing I do." My stomach dropped. The words were damning enough, but what made it worse was how fast it spread. Within hours, the post had been shared thousands of times, discussed in comment threads, dissected by strangers who didn't know us yet, felt entitled to weigh in. The hashtag #BirthdayWitch began trending, paired with photos of Claudia in her emerald gown from that infamous party. News blogs picked it up by afternoon. Socialite threatens in-law over multi-million-dollar estate, the headlines blared. Anchors chuckled as they reported it, calling it a family feud fit for television. The comments section filled with strangers, debating whether Claudia was a monster or a misunderstood matriarch. I read every word, my hands trembling around the phone. Riley called me into the living room, eyes wide with panic. "Did you see this? It's all over the news." Riley scrolled through the comments, jaw tightening. For the first time, doubt flickered across Riley's face. She couldn't have actually posted this, could she? I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled up the footage from the hidden camera, showed Riley the calm way Claudia had threatened legal action against me. Riley stared at the screen, then at me, but still said nothing. Silence again, the same silence that had followed every insult, every public humiliation. But silence was no longer an option. I began saving every screenshot, every article, every piece of digital evidence that tied Claudia's words to her intent. My lawyer would need it all. The more the story spread, the stronger my case became. Claudia had tried to ruin me privately, but in her arrogance, she had done it publicly instead. Calls from friends poured in. Some offered sympathy, others wanted gossip. My inbox filled with messages from reporters, asking for statements. I ignored them all, choosing instead to let Claudia's words speak louder than anything I could say. Let the world see her mask slip. By evening, Claudia herself issued a denial through her official account, claiming the viral post was fake, a fabrication meant to slander her. But denial could not erase the screenshots that lived on every corner of the internet. Her attempt at damage control only fueled more ridicule. Memes appeared mocking her tone, twisting her words into cruel jokes. The empire she had built on image and influence was crumbling brick by brick under the weight of her own arrogance, and I stood in the middle of it, quiet, watchful, collecting everything. Because what she didn't know was that this was only the beginning. By the time the scandal had torn through the city, I had already moved into preparation mode. Scandal fades in the public eye, but documents remain, and I knew that if I wanted true protection, I would need to fight Claudia, not in the ballroom or the banquet hall, but in the courthouse. I scheduled a quiet meeting with my attorney, a woman named Sullivan, who carried herself with the calm authority of someone who had seen far worse battles than mine. Her office smelled faintly of old paper and leather lined with shelves of thick law books no one touched anymore. I placed the folder of evidence on her desk, screenshots, printed emails, and most importantly, the footage from the hidden camera. Sullivan clicked through the video with narrowed eyes. When Claudia's voice filled the office, I will pursue legal control if necessary. Custody of the assets is safer in my hands. The lawyer leaned back in her chair and gave a thin smile. This, she said, is gold. Clear intent, calm delivery. It shows she wasn't joking, wasn't emotional. That helps us. I asked about the viral post. Sullivan nodded. We include it. Even if she denies authorship, the damage is done. It paints a pattern of behavior. Public hostility, private threats. Judges take note of patterns. She slid the folder back toward me, then tapped it with one polished fingernail. You've been smart to document everything. Most people don't. Her plan was straightforward. First, file for a protective order legally barring Claudia from direct contact. Second, petition the court to secure Riley's inheritance under terms that excluded Claudia from any future control. The viral scandal, the camera footage, the text messages, all of it would be submitted as evidence. When I left her office that evening, the air outside felt sharper, cooler. For the first time in months, I felt less like prey and more like someone sharpening a blade. Riley, however, remained a question mark. At home, Riley shuffled through the days with a clouded expression torn between loyalty to a mother and the reality of her cruelty. We argued in hushed tones, neither of us raising voices, but both carrying the weight of years ahead. She's still my mother, Riley whispered once. I didn't argue. Some truths can't be spoken without tearing fabric that can never be mended. Instead, I poured my energy into preparation. Every email Claudia sent after the scandal, angry, desperate, sometimes incoherent, I saved. Every letter she tried to slip under our door, I photographed. I began to feel less like a victim and more like an archivist of her downfall. There is a saying I've always liked: patience is the weapon of the strong. Claudia believed her money and influence made her untouchable. But what she didn't understand was that patience paired with proof outweighs arrogance every time. I slept more soundly in those weeks, not because the storm had passed, but because I finally held the umbrella. And I knew with absolute certainty that the day of reckoning would come at the reading of the will. The reading of the will took place on a gray morning inside a law office built more for intimidation than comfort. Dark wood panels lined the walls. The carpet muffled every footstep. Even the air felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of countless family disputes that had unfolded there before. Riley and I sat together at a long oak table. I could feel the tension in Riley's hand resting close to mine, but not touching. Across from us sat Claudia, draped in black silk, despite the absence of mourning. Her eyes glimmered with the confidence of someone convinced victory was already written. She tapped a jeweled pen against her notepad, as if she were the one in charge. A few extended relatives filled the chairs at the edges of the room, their faces eager for spectacle. The attorney entered with a leather briefcase and placed a thick envelope on the table. Claudia leaned forward slightly, her chin tilted, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Let's proceed, she said, her voice calm, almost regal. The attorney began to read. He spoke of the estate properties, investments, accounts that together totaled over $2 million. Claudia's pen stopped tapping. Her smile widened. For a moment, she looked like a queen waiting for her crown. Then the attorney cleared his throat and continued. It is the expressed will of the deceased that the entirety of this estate, including but not limited to the trust fund and real property, shall be transferred solely to Riley and Morgan, with no claim oversight or future contest permitted by Claudia. Silence cracked across the room. Claudia's head snapped toward the lawyer. What did you just say? Her voice lost its silk. It was sharp, jagged. The attorney repeated the words, this time slower. He slid a notarized copy of the updated will across the table, the inked signatures glistening under the fluorescent light. This amendment was executed and verified under full legal process, he said. It is binding. Claudia's face drained of color. Then came the eruption. She shoved her chair back so hard it screeched across the carpet. This is fraud, she shouted, her voice echoing against the wood-paneled walls. I built this family, I carried its name. You, she pointed at me, her hand trembling. You manipulated everything. You don't belong here. Riley finally spoke, voice low but steady. Enough, Mother. The words landed heavier than Claudia's outburst. For once, Riley's loyalty bent toward truth. Claudia blinked, stunned by the defiance, then laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. You'll regret this, she hissed. But no one moved to support her. The relatives who had come for drama kept their eyes fixed on the table, unwilling to share in her collapse. The attorney remained calm, sliding the rest of the documents into neat stacks. I said nothing. Silence, once my prison, had become my weapon. I simply met Claudia's gaze and held it until she looked away. When it was over, Claudia stormed out her heels, striking the floor like gunshots. The door slammed, rattling the glass pane. For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift from my chest. The showdown had ended, and I had not needed to shout to win. After the showdown, the days that followed felt strangely quiet. For months I had lived in the shadow of Claudia's schemes. Every meal, every gathering weighted with tension. Now the silence in our apartment was not heavy, but cleansing like the hush after a storm has finally broken. I would wake early, sip my coffee, and look out across the Boston skyline, marveling at how ordinary life could feel when you were no longer bracing for the next strike. Papers had been signed. The estate was secure. Claudia was legally barred from contesting any claim. She tried once more through whispers, through veiled threats, but the law stood firm and she was left with nothing but her fury. Riley struggled more. Loyalty to blood runs deep, even when it cuts. Some evenings I found Riley staring at old family photos, eyes clouded with grief. We spoke carefully, then gently learning to rebuild trust between us. Riley confessed, "I should have defended you sooner." I didn't reply with blame. Instead, I said, "We're here now. That's enough. Because love, if it is to last, must learn how to survive betrayal." As for Claudia, she became a ghost in her own social circles. The viral scandal had tarnished her reputation beyond repair. Friends who once flocked to her parties now declined invitations. The nickname number birthday witch lingered in corners of the internet, resurfacing whenever her name appeared. She had built her world on image. When the mask cracked, there was nothing beneath it. I kept the folder of evidence locked away. Not out of fear anymore, but as a reminder. A reminder that silence can be broken, that dignity can be defended, that even the most polished cruelty leaves traces if you know where to look. Looking back, I realized something simple: families often confuse control with love and obedience with loyalty. Claudia believed money gave her the right to shape lives. But love, real love, asks for respect, not submission. I'll never let anyone erase me from my own life again. And now I ask you, if you believe my revenge was justified, comment right. If you think there was a better way, drop your idea below. Because family battles are never as private as they seem. They live in all of us, in the choices we make, and in the courage we find to stand our ground.